Hi guys, it's Kelly Latavola here and I'm back with another video for Tonic Studios. Today I'm going to be using the Santa's Little Village set and then also the Snowman Snuggles, which I have done a previous video with that. So super excited about that. I decided to go with more of a clean and simple Christmas style. I have all of these visions for like really elaborate scenes, especially with like those little houses, but I know not everybody's into that. So in order to kind of break it up a little bit, I decided to go with just clean and simple Christmas. Here I'm just doing a ink blended background, so I'm using my blending daubers and some Nuvo hybrid ink. This is Siren Blue. The thing that to note here is because we're starting in the middle of the page, make sure you're buffing it off on a scrap piece of paper or craft mat or whatever you got going on, because if you try to just take it directly to the paper without buffing it off like I did here because I got impatient, you can see I have just this fat blue mark that will not rub out. It just won't. Now my characters are going to cover that up, so I'm not overly worried about it, but just slow layers, that's the best way to do this if you're not going to be bringing it in off the edge. So I'm heat setting this, not because in any other situation it would be necessary, but because I'm going to do some heat embossing over it. I wanted to make sure that background ink was completely dry before I started doing my stamping. These smaller snowflakes are from the Snowman Snuggles set, and I just grouped some together on an acrylic block, and then I'm just going to cover this entire circle. I just thought that it would be a fun background to add some interest. And it's super easy because, you know, you just stamp the same image, turn it around, turn it the other way. And then that whole area is covered. At the end of it, you'll see it kind of looks like a frosted window, which I really loved the way that that looked. If you are a scene person, don't worry, like those will be coming. Those will be coming because, you know, Christmas is still, what are we, like 2 months out or something, so I'll still have the opportunity to make plenty of sets with, or plenty of cards with these sets. So here you can kind of see that frosted window look kind of come together. I did have some snowflakes that stamped outside of my circle, a little too far for me to be comfortable with, so I'm just using a paintbrush to brush those away. It's clear ink on white cardstock, so it wasn't terribly noticeable. In the final cards, I think the characters distracted away from it. It wasn't anything. Like if you stamp in clear ink on a darker cardstock, you're going to get a very clear tone-on-tone look. But on white cardstock, it's really not even noticeable. So I'm just going to heat set all of this until it is smooth and shiny. And then I'm going to set this piece aside to work on my stamping. So this is the second time I've done this voiceover. Back to the card. Sorry. I'm apologizing for explaining my card to you when I'm trying to tell story time. Anyway, the snowman in this set is like dressable. You can dress him, which I think is super cool. So I picked out the Santa hat and then the double scarf, but there's other options in there too. And then so I'm just going to stamp all of these separately because I'm going to be fussy cutting them out. Make sure that you're using ink that is safe for alcohol markers. This black shadow ink from Nuvo is, and I stamped them twice just to make sure I had a really good dark impression. And then I am going to, the snowman, he has all different faces too, which I totally love. So you can pick like what his face looks like, and then you just stamp that on there. So he's totally customizable, which is super fun. So there's like a bow tie and a couple of different, I think there's two, there's like a winter hat, a top hat, I think, and a winter hat. There's some other options. As far as shading goes, when you're coloring anything white, you're just adding the shadows. So I just picked two gray colors, and I'm going to add the shadows around his face and around his tummy to give him a rounder appearance, and then underneath his chin where his head is sitting on top of his body would cast a shadow as well, then just blending that out with the lightest color. I'm going to be using the same two gray colors for all of the white that I'm coloring on this particular project. I kept a pretty minimalist color palette to just add again to that clean and simple Christmas feel I had going on. So anyway, I did this voiceover yesterday, and I had to do it in my family room, which I don't typically do because noise. That's just why. And it ended up halfway through the voiceover, which you can probably hear Emma crying right now because she's in her crate and she doesn't like it. So my apologies for that. There's literally nothing I can do because my house is never quiet. But anyway, halfway through the voiceover, my heat kicked on because I was in the family room. It is so loud. It sounded like I was in the shower. Like, it was so terrible. So I was just like, scrap it. I'll do it again tomorrow when I can be in the craft room. But in order for me to be in the craft room, Emma has to be in her crate. Why is that? Well, first of all, she's not trustworthy and she's totally mischievous because she's a puppy. But second of all, the reason last night I had to be out in the family room to do it was she got spayed on Wednesday. And so we had a little bit of a rough time. Everything was set up through the shelter because that's where we adopted her from, and it's included in her adoption fees for her to be spayed. So they told us what day it was going to be, what time to drop her off, told us to drop her off at 7 a.m. on Wednesday, and then come back and pick her up between 3 and 6. So I had something else going on. Eric did tried to drop her off at 7, and they were like, "Are you staying with her?" And Eric's like, "Nah, fam. They told me we just drop her off." And she's like, "Well, we don't have enough, we may not have enough cages to keep her." And Eric's like, "Well, like, we work because we have jobs, so not really sure what you want me to do here." So they end up finding a cage for her. Thankfully, her procedure went really well, no complications. But then they told him, well, you have to come immediately back. You have to come right back and get her because we don't have the space. So instead of being able to pick her up at 3 or 6, like between 3 and 6, when your workday would be over, we had to go get her at noon. So that was very frustrating. Then this poor little baby, she can't even stand up when he goes to pick her up. They're like just shoving paperwork in his hands. Read it when you get home. Here's her pain pills. Here's the cone. And so I'm sure that they're lovely. This is not the same. This is a different place than the shelter we adopted her from because they don't do those procedures there. And so I'm sure that they're very lovely on any other day, that they're not just totally overwhelmed. But apparently we had them on a day that they were overwhelmed, and it was rough. So then he finally, he has to carry her and all this other stuff to the car by himself. Then when he gets home, she promptly, she has to go to the bathroom 3 times. Poor little girl. And then she's totally out of it. She vomits on the kitchen floor. Clean that up. Basically didn't want to risk giving her any food or water, and she couldn't have any food the night before. So I waited a little bit. She threw up again. It was all just stomach bile. And then she slept for a little bit. Then we tried doing a quarter of a cup of water, and I fed her a handful of food out of my hand, and she seemed to hold that down okay. I think it was just the anesthesia wearing off. But so just really, she's very playful because she's just a little one, and we have to keep them. She's not allowed to run, jump, roughhouse, basically anything that she wants to do for the next 10 to 14 days, which is next to impossible to keep her from doing, by the way. You just have to supervise her every single minute of the day. Not that you don't anyway, because she likes to chew things. Back to the card. So you saw me fussy cut those out. I used that script pen that I outlined it with to go around the edges, and that just finishes off the edge really nicely. Here, I'm going to get him dressed. I'm going to put on his hat and his scarf, and then I'm going to go back in with those same gray markers and then just add in a little bit of shadow so it looks like that's all one cohesive piece. So yes, my poor little Emma, she had a rough couple of days. We are now on day 3 after the procedure. She seems mostly back to herself. But again, because she is totally mischievous, I cannot leave her alone in the house while I do a voiceover and shut the door. She's corrupting my good dog. Let me just say that. So Molly would never Molly was never a digger. Molly was not a chewer. Once she got out of the puppy stage, she was not a chewer. Today, Nathan learned the hard lesson that you can't leave food unsupervised around Emma. So we had homemade pizza and salad for dinner, and he decided, where was I? I was in the bedroom, and I told him, I said, you have to watch her, make sure she doesn't jump up. And he's like, okay. And then he decided he wanted to put on a pair of shorts. And then he was like, Emma's eating my pizza. And I was like, I told you, you cannot leave her alone, my child. So he lost a piece of pizza. It happened. And then he's like, well, Molly was eating my pizza too. And I said, well, once it's on the floor, like, it's free game. She's still a dog. I can't even fault her for that. So it has been a little rough in the household as far as the doggies are concerned, but I do believe we've turned a corner and we're back on track to just be normal individuals. So the last thing I'm going to do here after I've popped these up, we'll pop the snowman up on foam, is just add some glitter. There's a ton of images in these two sets that you could combine to do this with. Like you could put the Christmas tree behind the snowman, or put the Christmas tree and some presents, and like just this whole overall layout could be used multiple times. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.